If you're in a place where it is appropriate for you to do so, you can go ahead and close your eyes. Take a few slow, deep, relaxing breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth. With every inhale, feel more light and peace entering your body and mind. And with every exhale, feel like you are capable of letting go of all tension and anything you do not want. Breathing in light and peace through your nose, and as you exhale through your mouth, you can just let gravity take away all tension and anything you do not want. We picture ourselves on top of a beautiful mountain in the center of a circular grove of trees. Inside the center of our circle, a bonfire blazes forth, lighting us and the grove up with a sacred golden light. We recognize that this is the light of perfect love and perfect trust, and it easily burns away everything that is not like itself, leaving us safe and secure. Into this sacred space, we invoke the presence of our Creator. To many of us, our Creator reveals themselves as a god and goddess, a mother and father. Into this sacred space, we also invoke the presence of our angels and our teachers and guides. We dedicate the time that we are spending together to each other and to them, and we ask that we be led as we walk upon the way so that we can become happier, more loving, more successful, more prosperous, more understanding, and more peaceful people. Thank you very much. Together we say, blessed be. Many times when we look out upon this world, our first thought is, what can I do to fix this? What can I do to fix that? We automatically look out on the world and see a lack of some sort that needs to be filled, some sort of problem that needs to be fixed. That's the nature of the world as we understand it here. It's like a screen onto which all human consciousness is projecting. And what we are projecting in this world is a type of illness. It's a type of disease. This human race, as we understand ourselves to be, is a collection or a collective of one mind that thinks it's fragmented, and those fragments feel very unsafe, feel very vulnerable, and do whatever they need to do to protect themselves. As we project that unsafety, that lack of safety, that need for protection onto our screen, and then we interact with those projections as if they were real, because they seem very real, we get what we get. And so when you go back in the Bible, which is an occult repository, it's not a religious text for us. It's one of many ancient occult texts. There's been many people who've interpreted biblical writings in such a way as to believe that there was a sin that happened that we are all paying for. That sin in the Garden of Eden. And that sin supposedly was that the serpent tempted Eve to eat of the tree that God forbade and then shared it with Adam. That caused them to get the wrath of God, who then expelled them from paradise. And all of their offspring, which is everybody, continues to pay for their sin. Now, this is a story. This is a very ancient story from a very primitive mind that's trying to teach us something that's true in the guise of symbols. And the truth isn't that we sinned and God's mad at us and that we're paying for the sins of our ancestors. That represents instead, at least for us, at least from a magical point of view, that sin in the Garden of Eden is not sin. It's a mistake. It's an error. It's a way of looking at things that's incorrect. This idea that there's a fragment, that we are separate, vulnerable fragments that are not safe. That's what that symbolizes. And so when we were, quote, expelled from the Garden of Eden, it wasn't an expulsion that happened outside of us, that it's something that we did ourselves by looking at things in an errant way. When we stopped seeing ourselves as one with all power, one with all good, we get the results of that. And that's what we get to put up with, is the results of our decision that we made. We made a decision that we were separate, that we were vulnerable. There's a creation of a pseudo-self that we encountered by doing that. We call that the ego. But you don't have to call it that. You can call it whatever you want. This idea that we have a false self that we have taken on as reality, and that we then believe that that self is real, and then we also believe that that self can somehow teach us and guide us and help us, when in reality, that self is, first of all, doesn't really exist. It is the product of a diseased mind. It is the product of an illness, of a sickness that we have based on the decision that we made to separate. Now, the good news about all of that is that infinite intelligence has one will. And that one will is that you are safe, that you are happy, that you are joyous, and that you are beloved. And anything that does not look like that will is something that doesn't and cannot exist. So it's important to understand that infinite intelligence is the one and only reality. And since infinite intelligence is the one and only reality, the will of infinite intelligence is the only will that exists. And within that will is your safety, your freedom, and your love. And you were created out of an act of love, an extension of that love. And you are always at one with your Creator, and you are always at one with each other. Each of us is at one with one another, because there's only one mind. So anything that doesn't look like that is something that we're concocting. And that's that original error, if you will. So we're concocting this idea that we're separate and vulnerable. And therefore, the only way we can do that, we can't change ourselves, essentially. We can't change God's will. We're not powerful enough to change the will of infinite intelligence, but we are powerful enough to use our minds any way that we want to. That was what we were given. We were given free will. And so we can have experiences in this world that seem to be at odds with the will of the infinite. But that only happens within the realm of an illusion or a nightmare, or Maya, as some cultures call it. And when we say that, it's so important to understand that we're not saying that Maya or illusion doesn't exist in your experience or in the experience of other people. It's not helpful to take that concept that it's all an illusion and move into the world and say, well, it doesn't matter if I pay my bills, doesn't matter what I eat, doesn't matter if I exercise, doesn't matter if if I'm mean to somebody, if I'm kind to somebody, because it's all an illusion. That's not what we're talking about. Because within the illusion, everything seems very real. And so when you're working within the illusion, you still have to operate within the laws of that illusion, unless you can get to the point where you are working directly with the laws of the infinite. And when you're working with the laws of the infinite can seem to reverse the laws of this world, reverse the laws of time and space, reverse the laws of the illusion. But that's not because you're doing it. That's not because you, as a little ego, all of a sudden got more powerful than all the other egos and were able to change the laws of the illusion. It's because you are relinquishing your role as a separate little ego fighting for your survival. And instead, you're accepting who you were created as and allowing the will of the infinite to be what it is without interference. And then it appears as though things miraculously change and miraculously happen. But that's only because the things of this world are then no longer under the laws of your or other people's individual egos. They are then in alignment with the laws of the infinite. We're no longer interfering. So what you could say is that all of our suffering here, which again, we're not trying to discount and pretend like it's not happening. It very much is happening. But all of our suffering here is the result of our own interference with the will of the infinite. Now, that's not something to feel guilty about. It should make you feel good. It's like, oh, I've just been making mistakes. We've all been making mistakes. That's all. What's the cure? What's the alternative? What's the fix for this? Well, normally in this world, what we try to do is roll up our sleeves and get to work, and we try to fix things. But see, that's usually just further interference when we do that, unless we first allow ourselves to be enlightened by infinite intelligence. And when I say enlightened, I mean be taught, by being taught and guided by the infinite. Because see, what happens is this little separate ego, this little shard of light, this little chink of light that we think we are, this little sort of almost speck, it goes around the world thinking it's very alone, very vulnerable, and therefore it needs to puff itself up in order to feel stronger and not so alone and vulnerable. And that's just another side of the same mistake, that I'm separate and alone, and I've got to become powerful unto myself in order to withstand the slings and arrows that this world is always throwing at me. But the truth of the matter is that's not how you were created. That's not how I was created. That's not how any of us are created. We were not created as little insignificant specks of vulnerability. We were created as huge, giant beings of light. When you think of your soul, it's so much bigger than this world. Your soul is so much bigger than this world, so much bigger than problems, so much bigger than politics, so much bigger than disease, so much bigger than anything in the universe that you can conceive of. You're huge. But it's just like that story of the chicken and the eagle, where the chicken raised an eagle from an egg. Somehow the eagle had been abandoned. So the chicken raised the eagle, and the eagle kind of hung out with the chickens. And so it acted like a chicken the whole time. It didn't know any better. I'm a chicken. And so it went around pecking and doing things that chickens do. And then one day another eagle came by and said, "What are you doing?" And the eagle said, "Well, I'm just eating. I'm doing my normal stuff." And he said, "Yeah, but why don't you fly?" And the little eagle that thought it was a chicken said, "Do what? Fly?" And then it had to be taught that it had wings that could fly and that could soar and that could do so much more than what it thought it could do, because it was raised to be a chicken. And that's what we do. We're raised like we're these little insignificant little things that are so vulnerable. From the beginning, you are taught that you are vulnerable, that you're weak, that the world is hard, etc., etc. And so you don't even question, none of us even question the truth about who we are. But then we look for things like saviors. And so then you get a Jesus kind of figure, this Christ kind of figure, as something that's going to save you because you're so insignificant. But if there is such a thing as a Jesus or a Christ, and they were true and they were real, they wouldn't come back and say, "Oh, you poor little thing, yeah, I'll save you." They would come to you and say, "You're big, you're huge, you are me, you are the one, you are the light of the world, you are the savior, you're huge, you don't need me. The only thing you need me for is like that other eagle, is to show you, no, you're an eagle, not a chicken." So when you're looking for these ascended masters and things like that, the only function that they can really fulfill is to teach you who you already are, so that then you can start to act in a new way. And that's where things start to change. That's where things start to evolve. That's where things start to shift. And like we said just a few moments ago, that's when these laws of this world start to get reversed. And it looks as though major magic or miracles start happening. From the point of view of this world, yeah, they are miraculous. But in reality, it's nothing that special. It's just that you're shifting to that which is in alignment with the infinite, the will of the infinite, rather than the will of that little shard that you thought you were and that you think you are. And it's not your fault. You should never feel bad about having an ego or about any of that. It's just how you were raised. It's how we all, for lifetimes. It's just an old habit that we're all complicit in. We all conspire together to keep this up. But the moment that you start to at least question what you consider to be the reality of the situation and entertain the possibility that maybe you're bigger than all of this, maybe you personally are bigger than all of it. If that's true, then so is everybody else. And if that's true, ultimately there's no problem. Ultimately there's no problem. It's just a matter of time. We just have to wake up. So in the meantime, what we get to do is we get to be guided, led, and taught about our eaglehood rather than our chickenhood. So if we move through our day-to-day activities asking ourselves, am I acting like a chicken or an eagle? In other words, am I acting like an ego or a soul? And you start to question it. You don't have to be perfect at this. You just questioning it opens you up to the guidance of that teacher that is already within you, or that angel or that guide that does know your eaglehood, that does know who you are as a soul, and can just gently coax you and guide you and remind you that each and every encounter that you have is an opportunity to see yourself as a powerful soul rather than a powerless ego. Now, because when we create these pseudo selves, we imbue our creation with our own essence, which means that it starts to have its own survival instinct, right? So it starts to be like artificial intelligence that's used against ourselves. And that's the problem with the ego, is that it's the product of all of your genius devoid of soul. It's so that you've created through genius that you are this pseudo self that has no soul. And so then when we misidentify thinking that that's who we are, that soulless genius is programmed to keep us stuck there, to keep us snowed, so that we don't return to our truth, that we don't return to our eaglehood, because that chicken part of you, that ego part of you, thinks that it's going to die, and it's correct. It will die. So you have to understand that as you go about your day, it's almost like that old image of the angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other shoulder. It's not good versus evil so much as it is correct versus incorrect, error versus truth. So the angel on your shoulder is always reminding you that you don't exist in a place of poverty. You don't exist in a place of disease. You don't exist in a place of vulnerability. And the devil on your shoulder, or the ego, if you will, is always trying to either distract you so that you don't hear the voice of the angel, or it's trying to remind you about how hard everything is and how bad everything is, and to try to enroll you into behaviors that create problems for yourself, which seem like they cannot be solved. And all the while, it does that with a carrot dangling on a stick in front of your nose, trying to find happiness, find joy, find love, find all the things that we think we're lacking in order for us to get more and more mired in the illusion of that misbelief that we're nothing but a chicken. And again, nothing against chickens, but I'm just using that story. When in reality, none of that's true. The whole thing's a lie. The whole thing is one big lie. But we've bought it. We've believed it because we created it on some level. So it's like it's the whole Frankenstein's monster thing. When Frankenstein created a monster, and then that monster came back and harmed him. It's a metaphor for the ego. Mary Shelley was a brilliant author. Infinite intelligence doesn't will that we have an ego. Infinite intelligence doesn't will that we have wars and famines and problems and financial woes and political upheaval and the environmental destruction of the planet. That is not the will of the infinite, but it is the will of our collective egos. And so as we learn that we aren't an ego, we are a soul, we are an eagle, right? We're an eagle, not an ego. We are an eagle. We have wings to soar. Then, once we recognize that and realize that and just entertain the idea of that, then we can align ourselves with infinite intelligence, and then we are aligned with the power that can reverse these things for us. We can't reverse them for ourselves, but we can have them be reversed for us simply by aligning with who we are as souls. Next time you're confronted with a problem, ask yourself, am I a soul or an ego? Am I huge or am I small? Am I so much bigger than this world, or am I a little speck of dust that this world's going to gobble up? Which thing is it? Which is the truth? And just asking yourself, just contemplating that truth is going to put you light years ahead of where you were. Not only are you a soul and not a little speck of dust, but as a soul, you are, like we said before, in alignment with infinite intelligence's will. But that also means that you, as a unique soul, have a very specific function to fill in this world. And that function is always allowing for that reversal of the laws of this world through your presence. So you as a soul are like a beam of light from a central sun, and your specific beam has a very specific function, very specific role to fill in the awakening of the entire world. So infinite intelligence depends on you personally to question your ego, to question this world, to question whether you're small or big, to whether you're a chicken or an eagle. You don't have to be perfect. That's the best news. You don't have to have perfect thoughts all the time. You don't have to have everything mastered. You don't have to be a complete adept in order to fulfill your function. You simply have to be willing to be shown another way of looking at the world. You have to be willing to be aware of which voice or which teacher or which guide you're following. Am I following the guide that's constantly telling me how bad I am and how bad the world it is and how I have to fight? Or am I listening to that other voice that's telling me you are an impeccable soul? Infinite intelligence created you perfect. And infinite intelligence is shining through you. And through you, infinite intelligence is healing the entire world. You have that opportunity each and every moment to say, which voice am I listening to? Which goal am I functioning under? The goal of my ego or the goal of my soul? That's all you have to do is just be willing to make a choice. I'm going to choose for my soul, not my ego, right? And then the adeptship, all of the having perfect thoughts and all that stuff, that comes of its own accord because of your choice that you're making. But you don't have to wait to be perfect in order to fulfill your function because you were created perfect. You don't have to perfect your ego in order for spirit to use you. You just have to be willing to be used. You just have to be willing to relinquish your investment in your ego. That's all. You have to be willing to let go of those things as they're shown to you. You have to be willing to do without the gifts of poverty, the gifts of disease, the gifts of trauma, the gifts of anger, the gifts of rage, the gifts of fighting, the gifts of all of those things, because they come with their own little trinkets, which we believe are valuable. But in reality, the only real gift is who you already are, and it's already been given you. Already been given you. God gave you everything at your creation. Now, if you're not experiencing the everything that God granted you at your creation, it just means that you've got more practice to do. More practice. And that practice involves nothing more than being as present as you possibly can, just doing your best each and every moment when you can remember to ask yourself, which voice am I listening to? Which point of view am I coming from? How am I identifying myself? Am I identifying myself as an eagle or a chicken? When you do that, you will look back just after a very short period of time and say, I don't even recognize myself. I don't even recognize this world, because that's how powerful it is to allow infinite intelligence to work through you to undo and reverse all the laws of time and space. So you don't have to be perfect, and you don't have to feel like you don't know enough yet, or that you have to go learn more things in order to do this. All you have to do is be willing to let go of your investment in what's not working. Thank you so much for spending a little time with me today. Until next time, blessed be.